So when we're manually assessing the fatness of these steers, I'm going to feel those areas where I know only the underlying tissue is bone. So that would include the long ribs. When I feel those ribs, they're not obvious. There's not a lot of fat there either. The hip bone, sometimes referred to as the hook, when I press on the hip there, you can see that there is some give there, which tells me that animal is starting to lay down fat. Also the pin bone. There are some obvious fat deposits there, as we mentioned, either side of the tail head on the hip bone and along the backbone. And as I depress the skin along his back, I can also feel some softness there, which is telling me that that animal is in fact in fat score 3. So producers would know that when they get carcass feedback, they get fat depth at 2 sites, and that is the pH site, and if they've been consigned to MSA, then it will be fat depth at the 12th, 13th rib. To locate the pH site on an animal, we're going to find the pin bone there and draw an imaginary line up to the hip there. Find the high sacral vertebrae on the back there and come down to meet that line, and that's our pH site right there. So that's been identified as an area which is the best indicator of overall carcass fatness, but on live animal assessment we can't actually determine how much fat is there, and that's why we're looking at all these other sites and then relating it back to pH fat. For MSA carcasses or graded carcasses, producers are going to get a rib fat. There's the 13th rib there, there's the 12th rib. Between those ribs up there, about 3/4 of the way across the eye muscle, that would be your rib fat depth there on a carcass. So again, to assess the fatness of this brown steer manually, we're going to feel those, just put our hands along those long ribs there. Quite obvious there. I can feel those ribs quite obviously, and I can't feel any softness that which might indicate fat. This animal is more heavily muscled, so a bit more difficult to locate the hip or the hook bone there, but there it is. Not much give under there, so just a hint of fatness. If we look at the pin bones here, you can see not the obvious signs of fatness that we had in the big black steer, and you can still see that muscle seam that I referred to in the yards. And again, just running my hand along his backbone there, very little give there, telling me that this animal doesn't have the same amount of fatness as the large black steer. And again, finding that pH site there, and this animal was scanned with 4 mils of fat at the pH site.